Hi, this is Dr. Mike Yuan. From 1981 to 1985, I had the privilege of meeting Grandmaster Yang Shoujon on 3 separate occasions. The first meeting in 1981 was a real game changer. I'd been practicing Taiji Chuan for 5 years already and was deeply immersed in my teens and 20s in the theories and principles and the communities that were practicing around the Boston area. And I thought I had an idea of what Taiji Chuan was, but after that first meeting, it changed my entire perception of what Taiji Chuan was, what it was done for, and how it was practiced. So by twist of fate, after 14 years of dedication to Yang-style Taiji Chuan, where I was living the dream, practicing many forms a day, doing standing qigongs and power pushing at the Boston Taiji Club, which was operated by Jin Sun Chu, Yang Shoujong's second disciple. He was commissioned to head the North American branch of Yang Shoujong's lineage. Another fellow had been given the European branch, and there was one in Hong Kong, and then everything flows from there. But in my early 30s, I ended up letting go of Taiji Chuan practice, setting it on the side in order to pursue other Chinese research. So now I'm back to share with you insights I'd gained during these very precious encounters with Grandmaster Yang. There's 2 reasons for my return to Taiji Chuan. The first is a great sense of debt that I feel for the Yang family, for the generosity they expressed to me in sharing their secrets so openly and willingly. The second is that the last 36 years, despite being off doing other Chinese research, I've watched and weighed whether, with the availability of Yang Shoujong's form on the internet, which has been available for well over 20 years, whether that might actually have a beneficial effect in elevating significantly the level of practice in the world, and it hasn't. So I've got a grave concern that despite growing numbers of Yang-style Taiji Chuan students, practitioners in the world, that the median level is so far removed from that which the family knew. So as the world is now coming to want to understand China and Chinese culture and history, that Taiji Chuan, being one of China's guobao, country's treasures, if not represented adequately, could actually have a negative effect in misrepresenting what true Chinese brilliance and culture, high culture, is. So that's another reason for my coming back. It's been estimated that there are 250 million Taiji practitioners today. The vast majority, I'm sure, are Yang style. And that was promoted by Yang Shoujong's father, Yang澄甫, who took the traditional secret system that he had learned as 3rd generation lineage holder and modified it, simplified it to make it easy for the average person to practice. And as it turned out, that had a remarkable effect in popularizing it. One advantage I feel I have is that I have no investment in the Yang tradition, in that I had left early. I had known many of the presiding teachers and practitioners today. I was with them at that early level of discovery in the 70s. And at the same time, I don't have the heavy constraints and restrictions that either a formal lineage holder or a serious practitioner has who's part of the lineage. We can go into this much more extensively later, but there's a reason the Yang family has conducted themselves as they have over the last 70 years. Part of that has to do with the nature of the transmission and the fact that to become a dedicated in-the-door student requires tremendous expenditure and commitment, expenditure of energy and time and money and commitment to getting the method down with great precision. So that explains the general tendency to hold the cards close to the chest. My intention of coming out this way is to help to bridge the gap between the average young Taiji practitioner's understanding of Taiji Chuan and the standard set by the family as represented by Yang Shouzhong, which at this time is so far removed because we lack the tools and the methods to bridge that gap. So that's what's behind my coming back and wanting to help the Yang family to restore the standard. I would like to dedicate today to starting off immediately this first video with some recommendations to your current Taiji practice that could help you to experience immediate change and acceleration of your growth. But we need to start with the basics, so you need to please bear with me as I build this foundation for you. The first thing I would say, and this is from the direct experience I've had with the lineage descendants, but also Grandmaster Yang Shouzhong directly, is to ponder from where did this miraculous power or capability that the Yang family is reputed for, and which I directly experienced, come from. Generally, when we see the Yang style practice, it's done so softly, and there are many good teachers out there, and this, I'm hoping, will assist every practitioner and teacher and student in their development. So the first question is, how can a form done so softly be so effective as a martial art? So any of us who have practiced seriously know there's that gap, because in general, if you're an athlete, you need tension, you need athleticism, you need this and you need that. And the way Taiji Chuan is generally practiced today is very much done for the sake of health and relaxation, which is one of the reasons for its popularity. So we don't want to change that, but what we want to do is enhance that, but bridge the gap between its practice for health and longevity and for self-development, and by introducing the original standard and to see how that can be used to increase the efficacy and the joy even of your current practice. So the question is, again, if Taiji Chuan is practiced so softly, from where does this power come? The general idea is that if you sink your weight and your chi downward, that it will do the trick, and that is the general idea, correct? Over these years of research, in preparing to come back and make my contribution to the Yang style Taiji Chuan, I've created 21 insights, 7 which pertain to outer practice, application, pushing hands, 7 that pertain to Grandmaster Yang Shouzhong's solo form, and 7 that pertain to the inner structure that they had shared with me so generously. What I'd like to leave you with today is a focus on the 7 that have to do with application and pushing hands. Because once we establish a behavioral standard for you as to how to do it, but what to expect and what to aim for in that level of practice of the Yang family, then the more subtle aspect of the practice, namely how to do the solo form, in why Yang Shouzhong does it the way he does. And then that will then further lead to the biggest mystery, which is how is it that when practiced so softly, the Yang family practitioners were so able to develop such remarkable, miraculous strength, power, presence, capability. And from my experience, the stories you read are true. Grandmaster Yang was a true embodiment of that standard, and then more, then some, more than I could even have imagined. And I'll save that for the next videos. But today I want us to get right to practice and to focus on 2 pieces. One is that regardless of what style you're practicing, the idea of doing it softly, and that's a loaded subject matter, but let's just start with the idea, take the idea of what soft means to you and bring that all the way through. So the question is, how do you practice so softly and yet develop that power, develop that capability? The answer lies in the way that pushing hands is done. In the Yang family, and what is taught by other formal lineage holders, is that Ji, the pressing posture, where 2 people square off and connect with their wrists and try to uproot the other while keeping structure. So there's a very, very intricate way that it's done. It's easy to do it incorrectly, more easy to do it incorrectly, either by being too hard or too soft. And so I'd like to dedicate the rest of this video to imparting instruction that you yourself can begin to immediately incorporate into your practice. The first thing I'd like to say is this is a positive sharing, and I'm very aware that changing the way that you're doing things could always cause difficulties in relationships where you're already locked into a certain mode of practice. So I highly recommend that you separate this off from your current way of practicing, that you keep it separate. Blending will only lead to not only confusion within your body, but also in your relationships. So find some practitioners or acquaintances that you feel you can trust and be comfortable with, and to experiment with this method that I'm going to begin to share with you right now. So the biggest, the general idea. So the general idea of development in developing the fan tan li or fan tan jing, repelling strength or repelling power that the Yang family is known for, and it's really what it's all about, is to practice in a way where you're giving your partner great resistance. If you're pushing with the pressing posture on each other's wrists, the 4 areas that we generally begin to collapse in, the joints, are the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder, and the lower back. And that's given that you dedicate yourself to locking out your rear knee and making sure that the rear heel is very firmly grounded backwards into the ground. So you've got a very strong mechanical structure, which is necessary. So, and if you look at the Yang family descendants, you see that the vast majority do practice that way. Yang Shoudong does, Jin Sun Chu does, Chen Longxiang, who is Li Yaxian's student in Sichuan, does, Fu Zhongwen's grandson does, Yang Zhendor's grandson, Yang Jun, does. You see that commonality, and it's a very important one, especially when you apply it to the training. When you keep the rear leg straight and the heel substantial in the ground, then you can feel where the weaknesses are in the joints. And so dedicate yourself, depending on where you sense your weaknesses are, to not letting those joints bend or collapse. It's almost impossible, but the aim is to be like a drum. Notice that when you hit a drum, you bound away, but you don't see the drum extending towards you. It just stays the way it is. That's the ideal, that's the standard, almost nearly physically impossible to do, but you need to hold on to that thought form as to what you're after. That's a critical piece. So as you train, you'll find yourself getting physically tired because it's tremendously physically exerting, and you'll find you'll become very aware of where in your body the weak joints are that are collapsing under the weight of another person. So when you learn to push someone, it's as important as learning to be pushed. That's another point to pay attention to. And we don't want to be pushing, popping each other off in very light fashion. You want to be in as deep a stance as you can manage, and you want to require the other person to really push your entire body weight back. And then when you push someone, you want to feel that you're taking on their body weight. And so engage in conversation until you can adjust each other's techniques so that you get this effect. This is what if you just focus on this right now, you can begin to feel immediate change in your practice. Now, if someone's stronger than you, then you hold, and I'll just say that the tendency, I attribute this to Bill Moyers when he came out with his documentary on Qigong, went with David Eisenberg, MD from Harvard, and took videos of masters in the park putting out their Qi and manipulating their students in all sorts of ways. Even though it's real, how I saw it affecting the practice in America was that it turned from martial to an energy exchange, sort of healing, connectivity, feeling good in between in the exchange of energy. And as beneficial as this level of practice has been the last 40 years, I see it's gotten to a point. Now it's time to take all those benefits that have been gained and to go back to the basics, which is your forward stance as deep as you can, and when you push someone or someone pushes you, you require that you take on that person's full weight. It's not aggressive. There's a fine line between being martial and aggressive and saying you can't push me, and doing it in principle, which means if you push me, you're going to be doing it because out of meritocracy, so to speak, because you have executed the technique correctly. So it's critical at this early stage, just very similar to a child. It's very critical that the child be exposed to the right kind of parenting. Otherwise, a bad impression can be made on the child. The same thing here is that, except as an adult, you can use words to communicate what you're after, what the agreement is between you in helping each other develop this changjing, long power. Long power means the ability to take a person from your chest and to dole out your energy a foot or two in front of you as you extend your arm, but not do it in an abrupt fashion, in a violent fashion, but as you hold their weight, you're able to actually ground them, to be pushing them down, exerting your force downward while moving forward so that you can actually modulate their body. This is the discrete control you want to gain of force coming both out of your body and back to you. So just getting back to the G, even though the standard is not to move, you'll be able to accomplish that once the core becomes strong enough. But in training at this stage, allow your arm to extend, but do so in a very modulated, gradual fashion so that you gain control over the long power, either pulling your partner in or pushing them out, but try not to use external force, which is the tendency, is to lean forward on people and to be using the power from the back, the back side of your body. Whereas the secret the Yangs had was that it didn't come from the back. It came from a balance of the yin and the yang, the front of the body and the back of the body, so that you're actually doing it with your dantian from your center, from your core. We're going to be making available a Facebook private group that you can join for free by subscribing and then clicking the link in the description below, which will lead you there to answer a few questions. If you've answered them for us, then you get into the group, and we're going to start this conversation at this level of perfecting the pushing hands habits and structure and technique. You don't even have to be doing the pushing hands, the circle hands. All you need is someone who can stand there with you and to begin to exercise this pushing back and forth. We'll build in the rest of it later, but I want to stick with the bare bone fundamentals so that you can begin to experience that total body connection, and it'll always reflect in behavior. So we're going to stick with examination of behavior and correct alignment, and then slowly work our way in. Okay, I think that's enough for today. I'm so happy to begin this dialogue with you. Very much look forward to the future videos.